Story 1. I don't know if this exactly applies, but from the perspective of a woman, I've always been oblivious. I was convinced that no one could ever think of me romantically because I'm not conventionally attractive, which probably didn't help. In high school, I was working on a group project with friends when the subject of crushes came up. One boy revealed that another had a crush on someone we all knew, and I, in my oblivious enthusiasm, joined in with everyone asking, "Who?" He glanced away and said, "She's in our math class." I started guessing names. He said, "I'll tell you eventually." I replied, "You better." "Well, my mom's here. See you in algebra." Story 2. A handsome Brazilian student in my economics class asked if we could study for an upcoming exam together. He said I seemed intelligent and that he was having difficulty understanding some concepts. It was all a bit surprising to me. He came over to my dorm. I introduced him to my roommate and a couple of other friends who were there, including my boyfriend. We went to one of the dorm study rooms and reviewed the first of 3 chapters. Then he made some excuses and left. I was so confused. We only studied for 40 minutes. My roommate had to explain to me that the guy wasn't interested in being study partners. Story 3. When I was younger, a boy approached me at my locker and chatted for a bit. I knew him but not very well, and we never hung out. He suggested we go skiing or snowboarding sometime, and I thought he was just being playful. I didn't believe he actually meant to set a date, so I said, "Yeah, that'd be cool. Okay, bye," and walked away before he could say anything else. On another occasion, a guy I was friends with started eating the ice cubes from his drink and claimed, "They say when people are attracted to someone, they eat ice." I found that to be a strange piece of information and wasn't sure it was scientifically accurate. Then he asked if I ate ice, and I replied, "I guess sometimes in the summer because it's hot outside." I thought it was really odd, and the thought, "Is he trying to flirt?" crossed my mind, but then I dismissed it as silly. I figured he just liked ice, so I changed the subject. Looking back on that moment, I just think, yikes. Story 4. I was 18 and very naive. A guy I liked said I could sleep in his bed after a party. We got in bed, and he asked me what I wanted to do. I suggested watching something, and that's when I realized I had unintentionally hindered my own chances with friendship and innocence. I always assumed we were just friends and that he was out of my league. It wasn't until my mid-20s that I understood how naive I had been. Story 5. I had a dinner date with an incredibly beautiful girl once. She had a bad cold at the time, but we both agreed to go to dinner anyway. Things went great, and we made out on her doorstep, despite me catching her cold because she was cool and attractive. I thought there was a real attraction. At the very end of the date, I suggested we get a drink the following week. She paused for a bit too long and said she would only be willing to meet for coffee. I took this as a sign she wasn't romantically interested, so I never called her again. I ran into her a year later, and she pulled me aside and said, "Why did you blow me off?" Turns out she was in recovery and sober, but not comfortable talking about that on the first date, so all she was saying was that she doesn't go to bars. However, she fully expected a second date and some intimacy. Boy, did I mess that one up. Story 6. I worked in a movie theater, and a girl started chatting with me. We hit it off and I thought, awesome, a new friend. We made plans to see a movie at another theater. I showed up with my boyfriend and our best friend. At that moment, I realized from her expression that she intended it as a date. Needless to say, it was the most awkward movie ever. I never received a call back. Story 7. Man's story here. I was 15, seeing this girl. We had a routine where we would take walks with a bottle of alcohol mixed into a Coke. We ended up at her friend's house because we both needed to use the restroom. We decided to stay for a few minutes before leaving. We sat on the bed, and she leaned back into my arms and said, "It's hot. Should I take this off?" My drunk and foolish self replied, "Don't worry. I'll turn on the air conditioning." Story 8. I don't understand flirting, nor do I know how to flirt as an autistic woman. If you are interested, please just say so. Story 9. I was at a local metal show at a bar. I went out to the patio between sets to smoke. A group of guys came out, being rowdy and having fun. One of them wrapped his arms around his friend's waist and lifted him up. While I was on my phone, one of their group asked for a light. We introduced ourselves, and I offered my hand, completely unaware that he tried to kiss the back of it. But my firm grip on his limp hand prevented that. They asked, "What, you aren't trying to be picked up?" After I returned to my phone, thinking immediately of the literal lift I saw a moment ago, I replied, "Oh, haha. No, I like my feet firmly planted on the ground." There was silence. They dispersed. I realized the next day that they meant picked up as a dating reference, not physically being lifted. Story 10. My boyfriend. I flirt a lot. I enjoy flirting. Nothing excites me like witty banter with slightly sexual subtext. I knew my boyfriend as a loose acquaintance at the fringes of my friend group for 1.5 years before we started dating. I was smitten from the very beginning. Whenever we met during this time, I brought out all my flirting tactics. There was so much witty banter and many innuendos along with heated looks. I was quite touchy with him, but he never showed any interest in taking it beyond flirting, so I never pressed. Then, on a miserably cold January night, we found ourselves with a group of friends who wanted to go clubbing. While in line for the club at 3 a.m. and -3 degrees Celsius, I opened his jacket and snuggled inside, my arms around his waist and his arms around me to keep warm. After about an hour of clubbing, we ended up on the dance floor alone, just the two of us. It evolved from dancing to grinding when he spun me around and kissed me. Hallelujah. The next morning, I said something like, "We should have done this much sooner." He responded, "I wanted to so badly, but I really wasn't sure you liked me. Last night when I kissed you, I half expected you to slap me and storm off. I rest my case." Story 11. When I was 10, a boy in my class was moved to a desk next to me as punishment for misbehavior. It seemed really awful at the time. We bickered quite a bit, but soon realized we had several similar interests in TV shows and computers. Although he could be mean at times, we gradually started to get along well enough to work together in teams. I began to like him. One day, we did something bad and broke into the classroom during our lunch break to use the computer. He asked me if I liked him. Having experienced humiliation from boys and fake friends even back then, I scoffed and replied something like, "Don't be silly," thinking he was trying to trick me. I immediately regretted my response when I saw the look on his face. Soon after, we were caught, resulting in a different lunchtime detention, and he never spoke to me again. Sorry, Jonathan. I thought you were pranking me. I did like you. Story 12. A male input for you to laugh at. When I was a teenager, I was friends with a girl who was great fun. She had a vibrant personality, and I always had a crush on her. One night, a group of us was in a quiet bar when she came up to me and said, "I want you to come and kiss me because there's a guy over there looking at me, and he's creeping me out." We kissed for a good 5 minutes, and I returned to my drink thinking I had been a good friend. I had such a lack of confidence at that age that I didn't even think twice. There were other moments too, and it wasn't until years later that I had a realization about her. I would like to see her again to apologize for being such an idiot. Ladies, it's true that some of us can be quite oblivious. Story 13. As men, especially if you are not a super heartthrob to whom all women make advances, we rarely realize or take hints or subtle insinuations. Always try to be direct if you like someone. Story 14. I never learned how to flirt with boys because I attended an all-girls high school. However, I have noticed that many men interpret any kindness from women as a form of flirting, even if you are wearing a ring and standing next to your husband. My husband is not flirty, but he can be playful when he thinks he is being charming. Story 15. I asked for my husband's phone number before we started dating. He asked, "What number?" Yes, we exchanged numbers and have been together for 17 years. Story 16. I was 15 or 16 in high school when I met this really kind guy, even though we didn't share any classes. He noticed me because we had some mutual friends. He was kind of nerdy, and so was I, but I did everything in my power to avoid coming off that way because I was scared of showing my interests. It was in the last few days of my 10th grade year when I saw him in the cafeteria. We were taking our finals and waiting there between tests. I approached him to say hi and chat with our mutual friends. They eventually left, and it was just the two of us. Things got awkward because I only knew him in passing. He looked at me and said, "Why are you not popular? Person like you should be popular. I mean, look at you." I'll never forget that moment. At the time, I thought he was just being nice or funny, and I laughed it off. However, as I remember it, the way he looked at me made it seem like he genuinely adored me. I never saw him again, but I like to imagine that he's very successful and happy. Story 17. I have been seeing posts lately that express the same sentiment. Personally, I have never experienced this with men I have been interested in or even just flirted with. I tend to be very obvious and direct in expressing my attraction to people. I am the type to clearly say, "I really like you." Even if I do not verbalize it in a situation, you will still feel it. Story 18. Not your target demographic for the question, but I have a few good examples. In 11th grade, a girl I had a mild crush on caught me in the hallway and asked if I liked her new jeans. She did a spin and a half, stopped facing away from me, then provocatively showed off her legs. Her jeans were blue, but they had this sort of orange and brown color wash or faux wear on the knees, buttocks, and thighs. I said, "They look, I don't know, dirty." She spun around to face me straight on with serious eye contact, the kind where the face tilts down but then gives the upward puppy eyes, and said, "Probably because I'm a dirty girl." I laughed and said, "See you in class." This is me at peak obliviousness, strangely also featuring dirty jeans. At 22, I made plans with a crush to go out with a group. I was going to bring my friends, and she would bring hers. My friends ended up canceling, so I told her we could cancel or I didn't mind hanging out with her and her friends. She said that was cool and suggested we still go. When I showed up, she was alone and said her friends had bailed too. We had some drinks for a while before she asked if I wanted to play Mario Kart or Mario Party at her place, and I obliged. When we arrived, she grabbed the Nintendo 64, carried it from the living room, and plugged it into her bedroom TV. We played for an hour sitting on the bed without either of us making any moves on the other. She said she was tired and wanted to sleep, then suggested that because I had been drinking, I should stay over too. I asked, "Couch?" She said no. Bashful. I started to lie down on the bed fully clothed when she said, "Don't put your dirty jeans on my bedsheets. Take them off." Somehow, despite us both being in our underwear, we fell asleep without any action, until I woke up a few hours later. She stirred. I asked if she was awake, and she said, "Yes." I asked if she wanted to make out, and she said, "Finally." Story 19. I'm a woman and am apparently awful at recognizing when someone is hitting on me. Throughout my life, many people have told me, "That person was hitting on you," while I insisted they weren't. I can only recognize it when it is very obvious. In high school, I had a male friend who once asked if I had a crush on anyone, and I told him it was a guy who had graduated the previous year. He was in a band with my friend. It wasn't a big crush. I didn't even know him well. I simply thought, "Yeah, that guy is attractive." My friend's reaction was so shocking that it left me confused. He seemed disgusted and offended, exclaiming, "Him? Really?" I just could not understand his response. The guy was attractive and had plenty of girls interested in him. I also had no chance with him, and it wasn't that serious of a crush. It just felt like an overreaction. He later informed me that they had to kick him out of the band because he became affiliated with a neo-Nazi group. It took me until my late 20s, piecing everything together, to finally understand why he reacted that way. I'm not even sure he was telling the truth about the neo-Nazi claim. Story 20. I'm a guy. My problem is that I recognize flirting when it happens, but I don't know how to flirt back, so I just end up feeling awkward. Story 21. I finally confronted him and took him to my cave. Honestly, I became more and more obvious until even the least aware person couldn't miss it. We have been together for 30 years. Story 22. So many experiences have made me not even think about it. One girl showed me her underwear drawer and talked about how much she loved the feel of lace. Another girl mentioned she was tired after class, so I let her sleep in my bed and went downstairs. My dad later pointed out that it is common not to pick up on hints. At least I can say I know that my genetics won't be passed on. Due to these experiences and many instances of women saying I was undesirable, it feels impossible to think I will date, much less find someone to love. Story 23. My boyfriend and I have an interesting story. He is really into rock climbing, which is also his job. He worked at a climbing gym and I started working there shortly after. One day, he came home and said, "Hey, my friend wants to go climb this route that's about a 6-hour drive away. We're going to go." I thought that was awesome and told him to have fun and be safe. I casually asked if she knew we were dating, and he said she knew and that he talked about me all the time. A little while after that first climb, she kept asking him to go climbing again. It wasn't a big deal at first. He was accomplished and mentoring her. However, I started to feel a little suspicious of her, especially after a few interactions we had at work. I mentioned my feelings to him, and he tried to reassure me. I trust him. About a month later, he came home feeling really freaked out after climbing with her. She tried to get close and act all cuddly. This situation was surprising to my oblivious partner. I thought it was amusing that a younger girl was hitting on him. Story 24. My husband often doesn't recognize flirting because he is open to chatting with new people. He is more outgoing and talkative than I am. It does not bother me when he comes home saying, "This woman was chatting with me about something," and I can deduce that the woman was likely flirting, especially if she initially did not realize he was married. I observe how he interacts with women, and he never oversteps boundaries, which is why it doesn't concern me. I usually feel a little pleased that someone finds my husband attractive, making me feel even luckier to be married to him. Story 25. I went on a date with someone I met while working at a summer camp. It took me 3 years to realize that when he said, "It's a date," he actually meant it was a date and not just two friends getting dinner. Story 26. I'm very shy and didn't realize until recently how often I was being approached. A college friend told me years later that many of them wanted to be with me. I had no clue because I was either drunk and oblivious or sober and trying not to be noticed. The only guys I noticed were the creepy ones, usually much older than me. It still grosses me out to think about it. Story 27. I invited a man into my bed while we were camping, and he offered me his extra sleeping bag because I said I was cold. We ended up together not long after that, but I had to be much more direct. Story 28. I had a boy ask me out, and I literally said, "Are you joking?" This was when I was very young, not even in high school, I think. In college, I was hooking up with someone, and he changed his relationship status on Facebook to being in a relationship with me. I just sent him a confused message, not even asking if he was officially asking me out. I totally would have dated him too. Another time, I was hanging out with this guy a lot. We were walking his dog, and he asked if I was going to be the girl who just became his girlfriend, implying that instead of formally asking, we could just transition from friends with benefits to being in a relationship. I think I just giggled. I was very attractive back then. I just had low self-esteem. Story 29. Apparently, I do. I went to a chicken place with my ex-boyfriend. We ordered at the counter, and the guy at the register was very polite to me. I ordered my meal and got napkins and straws for both of us, then grabbed a table while my ex finished ordering. He sat down at the table with me and looked really angry. I asked him what was wrong, and he said the guy at the counter was staring at me and ogling me right in front of him, which upset him greatly. I didn't even notice anything unusual about the cashier or how he treated me. I didn't think anything of it and was really shocked by it. Men don't talk to me in public or flirt with me at all, even when I'm out by myself. Story 30. It is partly this and also partly the thought of acting on it, with the girl simply saying she was being friendly while you misread the situation. Story 31. I was at a Revco show at the House of Blues, and this extremely attractive girl came up and smiled. Shortly after, she started some small talk, and after a while of chatting, she asked me what I had planned for after the show. My clueless self told her I was just heading home, and shortly after, I did just that. While writing this, I just looked up and saw ladies, so my apologies for not reading. I'm a guy and have some time here. I've been speed reading Reddit for a bit, but since I already started writing halfway home, It clicked, and I told my friend who was driving. She gave me a perplexed look when I walked away. I think she was hitting on me. He looked back and started to recollect since he was right next to me and said, "Yeah, man, holy crap. She absolutely was." I felt bad for a while. She was genuinely sweet, and while I was definitely nice to her, I just walked away oblivious. I feel like I was a jerk for not picking up on it. I've never had a lot of confidence in life, and it just didn't register that someone would approach me and be interested in me. I have had girlfriends, but those relationships were more organic, friends of friends, meeting a few times, not something so direct. Get this, though, the same exact thing happened years later at a bar. This girl straight up walked up to me and said, "Come home with me now." I took a moment to think, but I deduced that if she had the confidence to say that to me, she probably had said it to others, and I didn't want any issues or to be in danger. She was definitely pretty, but we had zero conversation or even eye contact the whole night. She came out of nowhere. Again, maybe silly thinking, but I tend to overthink. I am likely in the top percentile of not grasping flirting. Story 32. There was a guy from my high school whom I always thought was cute. However, I had 2 serious long-term relationships during that time, so I was never really single to explore the option. A few years later, while we were in college, he messaged me and said he had always thought I was cool back then. Being oblivious, I just responded with, "Thank you so much." I didn't think much of it. Tragically, he passed away a year or 2 later from health complications. While reflecting on him, I remembered that message and looked back at it. I think he might have been shy and trying to express his feelings with that comment, but it's also possible he found me interesting and simply wanted to offer a compliment. Either way, it makes me sad that we'll never know what could have happened. Story 33. I'm still upset about the attention he gave this girl while dismissing me. I didn't matter enough. Story 34. I went on a motorcycle date and didn't know it was supposed to be a date. Also, my husband's best friend had tried to flirt with me first, and I had no idea. Story. I was young and had never dated, flirted, or been in a relationship. A group of soldiers went to Denny's one night. I was brand new. One of them, whom I don't even remember his name, let's call him Ted, and I started chatting. We got to his motorcycle. I love motorcycles and have been riding for years. We started talking about food. Do I like steak? I love steak. Don't overcook my cow. A few nights later, I received a text from Ted. Did I want to go eat some steak on his motorcycle? You didn't have to ask me twice. I opened my door before he knocked. Let's go. I have always been a don't touch me, and don't touch other people you aren't close to person. So even though I was riding as a passenger, I wasn't holding on to him. I could keep myself on the bike and move with the rider. At a red light on our way, he mentioned that he was nervous because he couldn't feel me back there. I told him not to worry. I was good and still there. Ted, you can hold on to me if you want. Me, oh, it's fine. I'm okay. Ted, oh. Me, I can put my hand on your shoulder if you want. Ted, yeah, that's okay. At dinner, I couldn't decide what sides I wanted with my steak, so he ordered one of the sides I couldn't pick from so I could have it. Then, he insisted on picking up the bill. I figured we would split it. On the ride back, he again offered for me to hold on to him, so I did because he seemed concerned. Once we got back, I thanked him for dinner and the ride. It was great. I offered him a fist bump and headed back to my room. I told my husband about it years later, and he agreed that it was supposed to be a date. Oops. I also didn't know that my husband's best friend at the time, Matt, was interested in dating me before my husband and I started dating. I was oblivious to that, too. My husband told me about it a couple of years ago. We were all friends and hung out on weekends for video games. My husband evidently didn't try to talk to me like that at first because Matt had mentioned his interest first and bro code. After a few months, when nothing happened, my husband spoke to Matt about liking me. Evidently, Matt's response was, "Go for it, dude. I hope you have better luck than I did. We've been married 16 years. Story 35. I remember a time at a restaurant while ordering something to go. I was chatting with the girl behind the register. During our conversation, she asked if she could have my number. I assumed it was for a loyalty reward program, So I replied, "No, it's okay." My friends started laughing. I didn't think much of it until he later mentioned that the restaurant doesn't even offer loyalty rewards. I can't help but realize how passive-aggressive my response unintentionally was. Story 36. Women. Why didn't he take my hints and make a move that would get him noticed on social media? I don't get it. He's so clueless. Men. I wish she would have asked me out. Story 37. I'm a little insecure and often think that people are just being nice or want to be my friend. The idea that someone might be interested in me rarely crosses my mind unless they explicitly express their interest. Story 38. Let me turn this around. Whenever I speak to a woman I don't know in public, she often assumes I am flirting with her. Story 39. As a man in his 30s, my entire social life has been completely impacted by the fact that I have no clue when a woman is flirting with me. Looking back on my life, I realize I have missed many opportunities that could have been something more, but I simply did not recognize them. To this day, I still wouldn't know, and I don't like to make assumptions. I need to be told outright for it to be clear enough. Honestly, I have no social life outside of work, no friends, and no confidence when it comes to doing anything alone or communicating with others outside of work. At work, I'm okay as long as we have work-related topics to discuss first. After that, I might open up for some non-work conversations. However, since we're colleagues, I will never assume they are flirting or interested in any way. Story 40. I've experienced this and may currently be going through it as well. However, I am also known for the same. I'm a very friendly person, and I love a chat. I genuinely cherish that wholesome boyhood vibe from my childhood, so I enjoy cultivating wholesome male friendships. To that end, I've been on dates. I didn't even realize were dates. Thankfully, it was with a kind and respectful guy. I'm quite dense when it comes to flirting, possibly because I'm so used to not feeling recognized as a high-functioning and attractive woman with autism spectrum disorder. Unless a guy sits down and tells me, "Look, I fancy you," I will assume he's just following the trail of dopamine I exude and wanting to be best friends who go for drinks and exchange good banter. Story 41. More often, I hear people say they thought I was gorgeous but were too afraid to act on it. It's deflating because they didn't realize I often felt like I was carrying something undesirable. Story 42. One of the women working at Subway about 12 years ago was flirting with me. She asked what I was doing Friday night several times. I worked at a pizzeria, so my Fridays were already committed, and I mentioned that. 8 years later, I realized she was trying to ask me out. If you're reading this, I would have said yes if I had understood back then. Story 43. In college, a girl told me, "I only come to this class because you are in it." I responded, "You should probably talk to the professor about that." This woman literally gave me an opportunity, and I hit it into my own face. 10 years later, I realized she was not trying to influence my attendance. Story 44. Looking back, I probably rejected more guys than I ever realized. I had very low self-esteem, so I could not even imagine that anyone would like me. Some of the guys I was really into, especially one. At a youth party, I talked to him, and he shyly touched my arm. I froze not because I disliked it, but because I was severely touch-starved. Other guys had told me I was disgusting and ugly my whole life. They spit on me and abused me. Here was a guy I liked, and when he touched me, I felt ashamed and froze. After that, he never returned to the place. I hope he is happy. He was sweet and shy, a good person in a sea of negative influences. We were teenagers. Story 45. As a girl, I have missed countless cues throughout my life that I now recognize as flirting. My low self-esteem made the idea of someone being interested in me more than just a friend seem amusing. After experiencing a transformation, I noticed an increase in direct advances that were impossible to ignore. I have come to realize that I was always somewhat attractive. I just couldn't see it for myself. Story 46. My now partner and I went for a walk on our first date during COVID times, so with face masks and social distancing. I gave him a quick kiss on the cheek and said I was excited for our second date. For the second date, I invited him to my place wearing a tight, low-cut dress. I touched his thighs, but nothing happened. I heavily flirted, yet still got no response. I laid my head in his lap, and still nothing. At this point, I thought he might be gay and just looking for friends, because a straight guy who wasn't interested would have pushed me away by now. But I figured maybe he was just clueless. Frustrated, I decided to kiss him, and he finally responded enthusiastically. We made out, and things escalated from there. Years later, we were discussing that time, and I mentioned how obviously I was flirting. He replied deadpan, "I just thought you felt comfortable with me as a friend. So, I'm really thankful that I'm very assertive." Story 47. Cue a class reunion. I am not good with names and faces, so I apologize up front and ask people not to be offended by my difficulty. A woman approached me, and I saw her name on the tag, pretending I knew who she was. She told me about an occasion long ago when she mustered the courage to ask if I would take her to a movie. I said no, but I did it with a little laugh, though I cannot remember the incident. She promptly ran to the restroom and had to be comforted by her friends. I felt bad for laughing and for not remembering the incident. Story 48. Between my freshman and sophomore years of college, I was going through some heartbreak, and my well-intentioned mother tried to set me up with the daughter of a friend of hers who was also home from college for the summer. I wasn't particularly interested at the time. I went out with her a few times over the summer and developed a sort of friendship with her. I recognized that she liked me, but I felt bad because I was still stuck on my ex. I just wasn't in a place emotionally where I was ready to accept her interest. Yes, I was an idiot. She treated me so well. Who knows what would have happened if I could have pulled my head out of my situation. Story 49. I want to share a story that includes a woman's perspective, even though I am a man. In college, after a night of drinking with friends, a girl and I realized we lived clear across campus from each other. We left together as our buildings were right next door. That year, I had a single occupancy room with a private balcony overlooking the ocean. This room was one of only two in the entire school, one for a male and the other for a female. The public school was located in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the country, which meant I had a multimillion-dollar view. When we arrived at our buildings, she mentioned that she had heard about the view from my room and would love to see it. I said she could come over the next day, but she insisted on going upstairs right then. I told her no, that it was too dark to see anything. She left. For years later, during a meetup at someone's house, she told me that she had been trying to sleep with me. It was at that moment I realized what had happened. Although I was slow to understand, she was ultimately glad that we hadn't acted on it and that she decided not to pursue dating me, thinking it would be too difficult since I seemed so oblivious. In the end, it all worked out for both of us. Story 50. I recently invited someone to go somewhere and paid for it, saying I invited him. While spending the entire time flirting with him, I even invited him in at the end. After months of flirting and going out of my way to talk to him, I still don't think he realized I was trying to flirt with him or go on a date. Everyone around us has slowly realized I'm flirting, but he hasn't yet. Story 51. I am a woman. In high school, a girl grabbed my butt and said I have a magnificent figure. Her girlfriend later grabbed my breasts. They were trying to get me into a threesome, but I didn't realize it. Story 52. I didn't realize I had a very specific type of autism that only affects my ability to recognize when a girl is trying to flirt with me until I was in my mid-20s and attended my high school reunion. Many of the girls told me they had a crush on me and tried to flirt with me. I was absolutely clueless. I even asked a high school ex if she was aware that quite a few girls had a crush on me back then. She confirmed it but wasn't worried because it was apparently obvious that I was clueless about everything. She compared me to a blind goat looking at a painting, whatever that means. Story 53. I am not oblivious. I am just afraid of making a move, even if I receive a rare green light. At a university department party, I was relaxing on a sofa, playing along to music with my kazoo. A girl and her friend, both of whom I shared a class with, sat next to me. The one who was clearly interested started asking me about music and myself. She took out a jaw harp and showcased what she could do. I turned on my music enthusiast mode and did not pick up on her playing footsie the entire time. Eventually, they both went dancing and I did not join them. In another instance, an attractive female acquaintance who was newly single mentioned this earlier that day while we hung out with a mutual friend. One night at a bar, she started heavily complimenting me. I thought the compliments were too excessive to take her seriously, so I laughed it off, ending a conversation that could have developed. A few days later, she sent me something flirty, and I responded very dryly, which visibly disappointed her. A different acquaintance with whom I shared some classes was at a pub where we were playing and singing on a newly installed piano with a few friends. She watched intently and eventually joined in, as she is a much better piano player than I am. Whenever we play music together, she goes for "I Want You, She's So Heavy" by the Beatles, and she also enjoys the medley from Abbey Road. A couple of months prior to this, she had recommended some music to me, but I got scared and again killed the vibe. A few years before these experiences, a completely different girl leaned against me while I was playing guitar in a pub. When I did not react to her visibly, my friend's then-girlfriend even questioned my orientation. So, if I ever complain that no women like me, just tell me to pay more attention. Story 54. Apparently, this has happened to me numerous times, but I was too interested in someone else to notice it. Story 55. The best experience I had was when I was at the cinema. I was about 15 years old and had gone with my mother to collect my sibling, who worked there. I was waiting in the foyer while my mother went to check how long they would be. A girl walked over to me and asked if I wanted to see a film with her. I replied, "Sorry, I'm waiting for my mother." To be fair, I was worried about disappearing without my mother knowing where I was or how I would get home, so it wasn't that bad, I guess. Story 56. If it isn't really obvious, then there is the doubt of no, that may just be me misinterpreting things, or I'm going to look like an idiot and suffer the pain of rejection scenarios, as well as simply not understanding the subtlety of it all. Story 57. In college, a friend of mine, whom I thought was just a friend, kept going out of his way to do little things for me, like offering to carry my books or walking me to class. It wasn't until a mutual friend pointed out that he liked me that I realized he was trying to make a move. I was too focused on my studies to notice at the time. Story 58. Does this question refer to our experiences with a man being oblivious to our flirting, or our stories as women being oblivious? The answers seem to go both ways. My story about an oblivious man: I was sitting next to my crush with my head on his shoulder, and he thought I was falling asleep. My story about an oblivious woman: my company was having a gala with a beauty contest. One of my colleagues encouraged me to participate, saying, "You'll definitely win. Trust me, I'm a designer." I thought he was just being polite. Story 59. At that time, I was 15 and met a cute girl in my high school. She was openly gay and constantly complimented me and got close, which I thought was just her personality. I had feelings for her but didn't want to overthink her actions or interpret them as romantic if they weren't. Turns out she had feelings for me, and everyone knew except me. It took me over a year to realize, and I received verbal confirmation from her at a party. By that point, she had a girlfriend, so I didn't pursue anything further. She is such a sweet girl, and although we don't talk often, I see her and her girlfriend's pictures on Instagram, and I wish her the best. Story 60. It is common in the lesbian community for two women to be completely into each other, flirt constantly, spend a lot of time together, and still wonder if the other is flirting. Story 61. I am a lesbian, and looking back, I often think, wow, I was foolish. There have been many instances where I assumed a girl was straight or out of my league. One time, a friend cuddled in my bed with me, and I never realized until years later that she had feelings for me. I thought she was straight, and we were just comfortable with each other. To feel better, I remind myself that it's better to be safe than sorry. I would be mortified to take a leap and make a move that could make a friend uncomfortable. Story 62. She invited me to her house to meet her cats after we were chatting about being the only lesbians we knew. I don't remember why, but I didn't go. Story 63. A few years ago, I was climbing often with a male friend. I had feelings for him, and sometimes it seemed like he felt the same way, but neither of us ever acted on it. One time, he invited me to go outdoor climbing with him and mentioned it would be easier for us to leave from his house early in the morning. So he invited me over, cooked a salmon dinner, and we watched the sunset while we ate. The next day, we had a long day of hiking and climbing together. On the drive home, he asked, "Should I take you back to your place or?" Without thinking, I responded, "Yeah, that would be great." It wasn't until later that I wondered, wait, was he inviting me to stay another night at his house? I'll never know if he was truly interested in me. Looking back, I realize I missed some clues. Story 64. My most recent ex and I got together about 7 years ago, over 20 years after we were in high school. She knew that I did not want to see her if she was in a relationship. She told me she would come over to my home to hang out with me while she was with another guy. She only admitted to having feelings for me 7 years ago. It feels like a total waste of time lost between then and now. Story 65. I have had many moments like these. I can especially think back to high school during our formal event, where we were required to have a date. Several guys asked me, and in my mind I thought, they are just asking because we have to. I didn't want to go anyway. Only years later did I realize that I was actually quite popular and that people wanted to go with me. I realized this just the other day. I used to have a friend I talked to online who would always turn on his webcam while hanging out in his garage, pointing it at his expensive car and yacht. He would be smoking cigars or drinking expensive alcohol. Back then I thought, why are you sitting in a garage? That's strange. Only last week did I realize he was trying to show off and was constantly trying to flirt with me. Story 66. Yes, all the time. I'm a lesbian, and I find it difficult to tell if a girl is flirting with me or just being friendly. It's especially challenging when you know they're gay because you don't know if they like you as a friend or more than that. That was the case with both of my ex-girlfriends. The first one was so obvious looking back on it. She would play with my hair and rub my arm to feel my clothes. She would also say things like, apparently they say that when flirting, people talk more often. It's probably why I'm talking so much. It went right over my head. I'm not kidding. I really didn't know. It wasn't until she told me that I looked back and thought, am I stupid? With my second girlfriend, we both missed social cues, so it took a year of flirting to actually do anything about it. Both of us flirted with each other, but we thought the other was just joking. Finally, our friend couldn't bear it anymore and helped us get together. I don't know if being a lesbian makes my experience unique, but I think girls can be really difficult to read sometimes. My straight friends struggle with it as well. I also have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, so that is a big part of it. Story 67. A girl told me she was a talented sword swallower. I responded, that sounds so dangerous. Then she proceeded to talk about the larger ones and where she would have to place her tongue. And yes, I realize I acted foolishly. Story 68. A woman here. This is not a gendered problem. We are all oblivious because everyone is different. I never know if people are friendly or flirting, so unless someone says it directly, I just assume they are friendly. Because if everyone who was nice and wanted to be around me or called me cute was flirting, then my ex-husband's grandma is definitely flirting with me. I thought someone wanted to go on walks with me because he was friendly. At some point, he asked if I had a boyfriend. I said no. I thought he was just making conversation. I asked him if he had a girlfriend, and he said, maybe you, and laughed. I laughed too, thinking he was joking, and we changed the subject. Story 69. This is embarrassing. I am a woman, and my entire life has been a series of realizing that I did not pick up on flirting or hints. A few years ago, my brother's best friend sent me a direct message that was a meme about having a crush on a girl. I did not understand and replied, haha. I later realized he was expressing his feelings for me. Story 70. I had a friend in high school who called me nearly every night during the summer between 10th and 11th grade. We would talk for hours. When junior prom came around, he asked if I was going. I said no because it wasn't my thing. But do you want to go? He asked. I replied, no, it's really not my thing. It finally hit me later that I felt much older, as if I were in my 20s, thinking, wait a minute. Story 71. As a lesbian, I noticed that women flirt as if they are international spies, providing coded messages. When men try to flirt, it's the opposite. It's obvious to me because I don't want that attention. Story 72. I went to school a long time ago with a guy, and we got along pretty well. I have always had issues with anxiety, and sometimes if I am focused on something else, my ears just don't work, and I zone out completely. I'm pretty sure we sort of had a thing, but I didn't know him very well other than that he used drugs and liked games. I was afraid of being in a relationship at the time, especially with a guy a little older than I was, and I had never been in one. I wasn't super crazy about him, but we got along really well. There is a chance he may have asked me, but I honestly don't remember. I recall a super awkward interaction, but nothing else. It's been so long. I remember after the fact that I wasn't paying attention to what he said, and I had no idea what I responded to because I was preoccupied. We still talk sometimes, but not a whole lot. With more recent events, I'm not sure I have the capacity to be in a relationship. Other than that, not really. I was never approached by boys. Story 73. As an unaware man, I can provide some defense for this obliviousness. One, probably the biggest issue is that you ladies are much less obvious than you think. Many things that feel like clear signals to us men are actually not. Not wanting to accidentally misunderstand and get labeled a creep or worse, it's safer just to assume it is all polite, mildly friendly banter rather than anything more. 2. Female rejection is harsh. After enough experiences, you start to convince yourself that you are unattractive to women and always will be. So the idea that anyone is interested in you or flirting with you becomes laughably absurd and never even enters your mind. 3. We may be smitten with someone else. I have many examples. One involved me pushing several girls off my lap to greet my then girlfriend, now my wife, and my wife's favorite memory is when a girl thought she could steal me and was making unpleasant faces and comments to my wife, who simply smiled knowingly at her, fully aware that I would remain unaffected. Story 74. In my early 20s, I once met two girls who were roommates at a club. They invited me to go back to their place at the end of the night, saying, "We can all have fun together." I honestly forgot about that offer on the morning bus. All three of us were on the bus coming back from the club, and I saw my usual stop pass by. I thought, all right, it's my stop. It was nice meeting you, and got off. I remembered where we were supposed to be going about 30 seconds later. I regretted that decision for a long time. Story 75. My now wife told me that she was about to give up on me when we finally got together. In my defense, I had some difficult experiences with relationships prior to her, and I was in a happy being single mindset. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.